The crystalline ship shattered like ice against the atmosphere of planet GX-249. Chief Scientist Lyra of the Etherian Science Council watched in horror as the ship's quantum stabilizers failed, sending cascading fractures through the vessel's transparent hull. Her silver skin flickered with distress patterns, a biological response she had been trained since childhood to suppress. Emergency protocols engaged, the ship's AI announced with characteristic Etherian calm. Survival probability, 12.3%. Lyra's four-fingered hands flew across the control interface, trying to redirect power to the failing systems. The planet's surface rushed up to meet her, a tapestry of violet forests and crystalline mountains that would have been beautiful under any other circumstances. Council ship resonance, this is Chief Scientist Lyra, she broadcast on all frequencies. Requesting immediate extraction. The static that answered told her everything she needed to know. The Council would not risk a rescue mission to such a dangerous world. It wasn't logical. It wasn't efficient. The crash felt like being born again. Metal screamed, crystal shattered, and Lyra's world became a chaos of motion and sound. When stillness finally returned, she found herself hanging upside down in her restraints, breathing the ship's rapidly thinning atmosphere. Her environmental suit activated automatically, encasing her in a second skin of advanced polymer. The suit's diagnostic system scrolled across her vision, structural integrity at 89%. Power reserves at 73%. Atmospheric filters engaged. Lyra released her restraints, dropping to what remained of the ceiling. The ship's cabin was almost unrecognizable. Where there had been elegant curves of crystal and light, there was now twisted metal and darkness. The emergency beacon pulsed weakly in one corner, its light reflecting off shards of the broken hull. "Display regional scan," she commanded. Her suit's holographic interface flickered to life, showing her the surrounding terrain. The crash had carved a long scar through the violet forest, ending in a small valley. The mountains loomed to the north, their crystalline peaks catching the light of the setting sun. A sound from outside made her freeze. Something large was moving through the wreckage, its steps heavy enough to make the broken hull vibrate. Lyra accessed her database, Planet GX-249, classified as a death world due to its aggressive megafauna and extreme environmental conditions. The Etherian Science Council had only approved this mission because of the planet's unique mineral compositions. The creature outside moved closer. Through a gap in the hull, Lyra caught a glimpse of iridescent scales and curved claws larger than her entire body. Her suit's sensors registered the beast's body heat, its massive life signs, its powerful bioelectric field. All her training told her to remain still, to trust in logic and probability. But something deeper, something her people had tried to engineer out of themselves generations ago, screamed at her to run. The hull groaned as the creature pressed against it. Lyra saw her chance, a small opening on the opposite side of the cabin, barely large enough for her slender frame. Moving with deliberate slowness, she began to edge toward it. The creature struck without warning, its claws punching through the hull like paper. Lyra abandoned stealth for speed, diving through the opening as the cabin collapsed behind her. She rolled down a small incline, her suit automatically hardening to protect her from the impact. The forest around her was alien in every sense of the word. The trees towered hundreds of meters into the sky, their violet leaves creating a canopy so dense it turned the afternoon into twilight. Bioluminescent fungi dotted the ground, pulsing with gentle light. In any other situation, she would have been fascinated by the complex ecosystem. The roar that echoed through the trees reminded her that scientific curiosity was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. Lyra ran, her suit enhancing her natural speed and agility. Behind her, she could hear the creature pursuing, its massive form crashing through the underbrush. She needed shelter, somewhere to hide and assess her situation. Her suit's scanner showed a cluster of dense crystal formations ahead, natural formations that might be too solid for the creature to break through. As she ran, Lyra tried her communications again. "This is Chief Scientist Lyra, to any Etherian vessels. Emergency extraction required." Nothing but static answered her. She was alone on a death world, abandoned by her people because of their rigid adherence to protocols and probabilities. The crystal formation loomed ahead, its faceted surface reflecting the last rays of sunlight. Lyra dove into a narrow crevice between two crystals, making herself as small as possible. The creature's roars grew closer, then stopped. She could hear it sniffing the air, searching for her. In the growing darkness, Lyra's silver skin betrayed her with another flash of distress patterns. She forced herself to be still, to control her biological responses as she had been taught. But for the first time in her life, she wondered if suppressing emotions and instincts was truly the mark of an advanced civilization. The night cycle was beginning. New sounds emerged from the forest, calls and cries unlike anything in her database. Her suit's power reserves were slowly draining, and she had no way to recharge them. The creature outside had moved away, but she could hear others moving in the darkness. Lyra activated her suit's recording function. Day 1 on planet GX-249. I am alone. My people have abandoned me. But I refuse to die here. She paused, then added something that would have shocked her only hours earlier, and I am afraid. Dawn arrived with a symphony of alien sounds. Lyra had spent the night in her crystal refuge, watching as bioluminescent creatures danced through the canopy above. Her suit's power had dropped to 68%, and the reality of her situation was becoming clearer with each passing hour. She activated her recorder. Day 2 on GX-249. The approved protocol would be to remain in place and await rescue. She paused, watching a small flying creature land on a nearby crystal. But I have concluded that no rescue will come. The Council's risk assessment protocols would never approve a mission to a death world, regardless of the circumstances. The flying creature, she decided to call it a crystal glider, had skin that seemed to shift colors like liquid mercury. As she watched, it used its long, delicate beak to extract something from a crack in the crystal. What caught her attention wasn't the creature's behavior, but what happened next. Another crystal glider landed nearby, clearly struggling with an injured wing. Without hesitation, the first one shared its food, then helped groom the injured one's wing. Lyra's scientific training kicked in, and she began documenting the interaction. Observed behavior suggests complex social structures and empathy among local fauna, she recorded. Such traits were previously thought impossible in non-sentient species. The irony wasn't lost on her, these primitive creatures showed more care for their wounded than her own people had shown for her. Over the next several hours, Lyra carefully emerged from her shelter, using her suit's scanners to avoid the larger predators. She needed to find sustainable sources of power and shelter. The forest floor was a maze of crystal formations and massive tree roots, creating natural corridors and caves. A deep rumbling sound made her freeze. Through a gap in the trees, she saw one of the massive predators that had chased her yesterday. In the daylight, she could properly observe it, 12 meters of iridescent scales and rippling muscle. But what happened next challenged everything she had been taught about primitive worlds. The creature was using tools. Not sophisticated technology, but it was deliberately using fallen crystal shards to scratch marks into a tree trunk. As she watched, another of its kind approached, studied the marks, and responded by making different marks. "They're communicating," Lyra whispered into her recorder. Not just through sounds or pheromones, but through deliberate symbolic representation. Her people had classified these beings as mindless predators, but they were wrong. So wrong. Movement in the underbrush caught her attention. A smaller creature, about her size, emerged. It walked on 4 legs and had plates of natural armor along its spine. She tensed, ready to run, but the creature barely glanced at her. Instead, it began gathering fallen fruit, carefully selecting only the ripest ones. Lyra followed at a safe distance, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. The creature led her to what appeared to be a nest, where several others of its kind waited. They shared the fruit, making sure even the youngest members of their group were fed first. "These beings have family structures," she recorded. They show planning, cooperation, and resource sharing. Our initial surveys categorized them as primitive based solely on their lack of technology, but they possess intelligence that manifests in different ways. Over the next several days, Lyra learned to survive by watching these creatures. She discovered which fruits were safe to eat by observing their feeding patterns. She learned to use the crystal formations for shelter, just as many local species did. Her suit's power stabilized at 45% after she figured out how to position herself to catch the maximum amount of sunlight filtering through the canopy. But perhaps most importantly, she learned that her people's definition of intelligence and civilization was fundamentally flawed. The creatures of GX-249 had complex social structures, communication systems, and even what appeared to be art. She had discovered caves where various species created intricate patterns using colored crystals and bioluminescent materials. On her 10th day, while documenting a group of crystal gliders teaching their young to fly, Lyra's suit detected something new. A heat signature in the upper atmosphere, too regular to be natural. Something was entering the planet's atmosphere, and it wasn't Etherian. The signature was rougher, less elegant than Etherian ships. It burned bright against the evening sky, but it was clearly under control. Someone else had come to GX-249, someone whose technology was different from her people's crystalline perfection. Lyra found herself facing a choice. Her people's protocols were clear: avoid all contact with less advanced civilizations. But she had learned that less advanced was a dangerous assumption. These newcomers, whoever they were, represented both risk and opportunity. As she watched the ship descend through the layers of atmosphere, Lyra made her decision. She would observe these newcomers, just as she had observed the planet's other inhabitants. And perhaps, if they proved to be different from her own people, she would reveal herself. The ship disappeared behind the crystal mountains, but its arrival had already changed everything. Lyra was no longer just a stranded scientist, she was about to become first contact for whoever was on that ship. And after everything she had learned about assumptions and intelligence, she was determined to approach this encounter with an open mind. Day 10, she recorded, her silver skin pulsing with anticipation rather than fear. New parameters have entered the equation. And for the first time since my crash, I feel something my people would consider highly illogical: hope. Lyra watched from the dense undergrowth as the newcomers established their base camp. Her suit's translators were struggling with their language, but after 3 days of observation, she was beginning to understand their patterns. They called themselves humans. Their ship was nothing like the elegant crystalline vessels of her people. It was built of metal and composite materials, designed for function rather than aesthetics. Yet she had watched it land with perfect precision, despite its seemingly crude design. The expedition team consisted of 6 humans. Their leader, who the others called Commander Harrison, was a tall figure with dark skin and gray-streaked hair. He moved with purposeful confidence, but never ordered his team to take risks he wouldn't take himself, a concept that would have baffled her people. Day 13, Lyra whispered into her recorder. The humans display fascinating behavioral patterns. Their technology is less advanced than ours, yet they interact with this world in ways my people never considered. She watched as their xenobiologist, Dr. Patel, approached one of the larger predators with a device that emitted low-frequency sounds. Instead of running or attacking, the creature responded to the sounds, allowing the human to scan it from a safe distance. They were communicating with the wildlife, not just studying it. Their security officer, Lieutenant Santos, maintained a constant watch but never fired her weapons unless absolutely necessary. When smaller creatures approached their camp, she would simply make loud noises to ward them off. It was so different from the Etherian approach of total isolation and defensive shields. Most fascinating was their engineer, Takashi, who spent hours studying the crystal formations that Lyra's people had dismissed as simple minerals. She watched him take readings, his eyes lighting up when he discovered the crystal's unique properties. "These could revolutionize our communication systems," he had said excitedly to his teammates. On her 5th day of observation, everything changed. A massive storm swept in from the mountains, bringing with it winds strong enough to uproot the ancient trees. The humans quickly secured their equipment, but one of their sensor arrays broke free, tumbling toward a cliff edge. Takashi ran after it without hesitation. Lyra's suit calculated the probabilities, he wouldn't reach it in time, and the ground was becoming unstable. The logical choice would be to let the equipment fall. But these humans didn't seem to operate on pure logic. Commander Harrison sprinted after his engineer, calling for him to stop. A crack appeared in the ground between them. Lyra's sensors detected the imminent collapse. Without thinking, she emerged from her hiding place. "Stop," she called out, her translator converting her words into their language. "The ground structure is failing." The humans spun toward her, weapons raising instinctively before lowering in shock. Takashi froze, mere meters from the cliff edge. The sensor array tumbled into the abyss, but Lyra was already moving, her suit's enhanced strength allowing her to pull the engineer back just as the ground gave way. For a moment, everyone stood in stunned silence, the storm raging around them. Then Commander Harrison stepped forward, his hands raised to show they were empty. "Thank you," he said simply. "You just saved my crew member's life." Lyra's skin flickered with emotion she didn't try to suppress. "Your crew member was attempting to save your equipment." It was illogical, but admirable. A smile crossed the commander's face. Sometimes the most illogical actions lead to the most important discoveries. He gestured toward their ship. "I think we have a lot to talk about, but first, let's get out of this storm." Inside the human vessel, Lyra found herself surrounded by curious but unthreatening faces. Their medical officer, Dr. Rivera, immediately offered to check her for injuries, showing concern for an alien she had just met. Their pilot, Jensen, brought her something to drink, explaining with a grin that they had tested everything on the planet for compatibility with carbon-based life. As the storm raged outside, Lyra told them her story. She explained about her crash, her people's abandonment, and what she had learned during her time alone on GX-249. The humans listened intently, asking questions that showed genuine curiosity rather than judgment. "Your people just left you here?" Lieutenant Santos asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Because of protocols?" "It was considered the logical course of action," Lyra explained. "The risk of sending a rescue mission to a death world was deemed unacceptable." "Logic without compassion isn't wisdom," Commander Harrison said quietly. "It's just math." The word struck Lyra deeply. She looked around at these humans, with their patchwork of different colors and sizes, their emotional openness, their obvious care for each other. They were everything her people would consider primitive, and yet they understood something the Etherians had forgotten. "We have a long-range transmitter," Takashi offered. "We could try to contact your people, let them know you're alive." Lyra's skin rippled with an emotion she was only now learning to name: gratitude. "Thank you, but I believe I have much to learn from your expedition first." "If you're willing to have me?" Commander Harrison smiled. "Well, we came here to study new life forms and make first contact. I'd say having an alien scientist join our team fits perfectly within our mission parameters." As the humans laughed at their leader's joke, Lyra felt something she had never experienced in her centuries of logical, controlled existence. She felt like she belonged. Day 13, Addendum, she recorded later. "I have discovered that true advancement lies not in the suppression of emotions, but in learning how to use them wisely. The humans call it heart. Perhaps that is what my people have been missing all along." The first tremor hit during what the humans called breakfast. Lyra was studying their fascinating habit of communal eating when the ground shook, sending vibrations through the ship's hull. Her suit's sensors immediately began recording seismic data. "That's the third one this week," Dr. Patel noted, frowning at her tablet. "And they're getting stronger." Commander Harrison turned to Lyra. "Your people must have done geological surveys. Was this planet known for seismic activity?" "Negative," Lyra responded, her silver skin pulsing with concern. "GX-249 should be tectonically stable. Unless..." She quickly accessed her suit's archived data. The crystal formations. They're not just minerals, they're part of a planetary network, like neurons in a brain. Takashi's eyes lit up. The energy readings I've been getting, they're not random. The crystals are responding to something. Before anyone could respond, a stronger tremor rocked the ship. Through the viewport, Lyra saw something that made her translator stutter. The massive crystal mountains were glowing. Full scan, now. Commander Harrison ordered. The ship's sensors came alive, painting a frightening picture. The crystal network was activating, creating energy pulses that were destabilizing the planet's crust. The wildlife, Dr. Rivera suddenly said. They're all moving. Look. On the monitors, they could see masses of creatures heading toward higher ground. The great predators were leading smaller species, guiding them away from the lowlands. They know something we don't, Lyra realized. Just like they've known things my people missed for centuries. Commander, we need to follow them. Harrison didn't hesitate. Pack essential equipment only. We move in 10 minutes. What followed was a revelation for Lyra. The humans didn't debate protocols or calculate probabilities. They moved with purpose, gathering only what they needed, helping each other prepare. When Lieutenant Santos discovered their portable generator was too heavy to carry, Jensen immediately suggested dismantling it for parts. They followed the wildlife up into the foothills, watching in amazement as different species moved together, predator and prey alike focused only on survival. The ground continued to shake, and the crystal mountains pulsed with increasing intensity. It's like a heartbeat, Takashi said, checking his readings. The pulses are getting stronger and more frequent. Lyra's suit suddenly picked up something new. Energy spike incoming, she shouted. The humans reacted instantly, diving for cover as a wave of crystal energy swept across the landscape. Where it touched, the ground transformed, sprouting new crystal formations that grew like accelerated plants. The planet's not dying, Dr. Patel breathed in wonder. It's changing. Evolving. But the transformation will destroy everything in its path, Lyra added. Look. She pointed to where the energy wave had left crystal formations that were already crumbling, unstable in their rapid growth. Commander Harrison's face set in determination. Then we need to help evacuate as many creatures as we can. Dr. Patel, work with Lyra to predict the energy wave patterns. Takashi, see if you can use those crystal fragments to create some kind of warning system. The rest of us will help guide the wildlife to safe zones. For the next several hours, they worked tirelessly. Lyra watched in amazement as the humans used everything from sound devices to makeshift barriers to guide creatures to safety. When they found a group of young crystal gliders trapped by falling debris, Lieutenant Santos risked her life to clear a path for them, while Dr. Rivera treated their injuries. Your people would consider this highly illogical, Lyra said to Commander Harrison as they helped a wounded blade back to higher ground. Risking human lives for non-sentient creatures. Harrison smiled as he watched Dr. Rivera bandaging the creature's leg. Look around you, Lyra. These beings might not build ships or write books, but they feel fear, pain, love. They protect their families and help their neighbors. Seems pretty sentient to me. A massive tremor nearly knocked them off their feet. The crystal mountains were now pulsing with blinding light, and the transformation wave was spreading faster. Commander! Takashi called out. The crystals, they're not just changing the planet. They're trying to communicate. Lyra rushed to examine his readings. Her suit's advanced sensors confirmed it, the energy pulses weren't random. They were a pattern, a language older than any civilization. It's asking for help, she whispered. The planet itself is alive, and it's reaching out. The humans gathered around her as she explained what her sensors were detecting. The crystal network was trying to evolve, to reach a new stage of planetary consciousness, but the process was too rapid, too violent. We need to slow it down, Dr. Patel said. Give it time to stabilize. But how do we communicate with a planet? Jensen asked. Lyra looked at her suit, then at the humans' equipment. We combine our technologies. Your understanding of communication with this world's creatures, and my people's crystal-based systems. Together, we might be able to create a bridge. What followed was a feat of cooperation that would have been impossible for either species alone. While the humans used their equipment to generate frequencies that calmed the local wildlife, Lyra reprogrammed her suit to resonate with the crystal network. Takashi and Dr. Patel worked to merge their systems, creating something entirely new. As the next energy wave approached, they activated their makeshift communicator. The effect was immediate, the wave slowed, the violent tremors gentled. The crystal mountain still glowed, but now with a steady, peaceful light. It's working, Lyra breathed, her skin glowing with joy. The planet is still evolving, but now at a pace that won't destroy its inhabitants. Around them, the wildlife began to settle. The great predators laid down to rest, while crystal gliders swooped overhead, their calls no longer panicked, but almost musical. Commander Harrison placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder. You know, when we came to study this world, we never imagined we'd end up helping it give birth to a new form of consciousness. And I never imagined I would find wisdom in what my people considered primitive emotions, Lyra replied. Perhaps that is the greatest evolution of all. The Etherian ship appeared in the dawn sky 30 days after the crystal transformation. Its perfect crystalline form caught the light of GX-249's three suns, creating rainbow cascades across the clouds. Lyra stood outside the human expedition's ship, watching her people's vessel descend with mixed emotions that she no longer tried to suppress. Are you okay? Commander Harrison asked, standing beside her. They're here because of the crystal network's evolution, Lyra explained, her silver skin rippling with complex patterns. Such a significant planetary change would have triggered automatic monitoring systems. They cannot ignore this. The Etherian ship landed with characteristic precision, its crystal panels shifting to create a seamless exit ramp. Three figures emerged, their environmental suits gleaming with the same perfection that Lyra had once found comforting. Now it seemed cold, artificial. Chief Scientist Lyra, the lead figure, called out. You have violated multiple protocols. Your continued interaction with pre-advanced species must cease immediately. Prepare for extraction. Commander Harrison stepped forward. I'm Commander Reese Harrison of the Earth science vessel Horizon. We saved your scientist's life when you abandoned her. Perhaps a thank you would be appropriate? The Etherian seemed taken aback by his direct address. The leader's suit flickered with patterns that Lyra recognized as disapproval. The human speaks out of turn, another Etherian said. This confirms our assessment of their primitive nature. Primitive? Dr. Rivera emerged from the ship, anger clear in her voice. We're not the ones who abandoned our own people to die because of some protocols. Lyra watched the exchange, seeing her two worlds collide. The Etherians, with their perfect logic and advanced technology, and the humans, with their messy emotions and remarkable wisdom. The protocols exist for a reason, the lead Etherian stated. Contact with less advanced species inevitably leads to contamination of both cultures. Lyra, you have spent too long among them. Your emotional displays indicate significant deterioration. No, Lyra said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. Not deterioration. Evolution. She stepped forward, her skin glowing with purpose. I have learned more in my time here than in all my centuries of following protocols. These humans, whom you dismiss as primitive, helped save an entire planet. They showed me that true advancement isn't about suppressing emotions or avoiding risk. It's about using both logic and feeling to make wise choices. The Etherians shifted uncomfortably. The planetary transformation was a natural phenomenon. Our sensors dash. Your sensors missed everything important about this world, Lyra interrupted. You missed the intelligence of its creatures, the complexity of its ecosystem, and the consciousness of its crystal network. You missed it because you were too focused on your protocols to actually observe and learn. Lieutenant Santos had emerged with the others, her hand resting casually on her weapon. Pretty big blind spot for such an advanced civilization. The lead Etherian suit displayed patterns of confusion and frustration. Lyra, you must return with us. Your place is among your own kind. My kind? Lyra looked around at the humans who had become her friends, at the transformed landscape where creatures that her people had dismissed as simple animals lived in complex societies. My kind are those who seek to learn, to grow, to feel. My kind are those who value life in all its forms. She straightened to her full height. I formally reject extraction. I choose to remain here as a liaison between our peoples, not because of protocols, but because it is right. This is unprecedented, one of the Etherians protested. Good, Commander Harrison said with a smile. Unprecedented usually means we're learning something new. The Etherians conferred among themselves, their suits flickering with rapid communication patterns. Finally, the leader turned back to Lyra. Your decision violates all established protocols, they said. But, the planetary transformation has created unique circumstances. Perhaps some protocols require reassessment. Lyra's skin glowed with surprise and hope. It was a tiny crack in the perfect logical facade of her people, but it was something. I will remain as an observer, she told them. And I will share everything I learn about this world, its creatures, and the humans. Not through cold data and probability calculations, but through true understanding. As the Etherian ship departed, Lyra stood with her human friends, watching it disappear into the crystal-studded sky. Dr. Patel was already excitedly discussing plans for new research projects. Takashi was sketching designs for improved communication systems based on the crystal network. Lieutenant Santos was teaching a young bladeback to fetch thrown objects, while Dr. Rivera documented its learning patterns. You know, Commander Harrison said quietly, when we came to this planet, we thought we were just going to study its wildlife. Instead, we helped a planet evolve, made first contact with an alien scientist, and might have just started a cultural revolution among one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. Lyra's skin rippled with joy as a crystal glider landed nearby, its wings shimmering with the same patterns as her own bioluminescence. Perhaps that is the true measure of advancement, not how far we've come, but how willing we are to keep learning and growing. Well, Harrison grinned, we've got a whole planet of teachers right here. And something tells me we're all going to be very good students. In the distance, the crystal mountains pulsed with gentle light, a heartbeat of planetary consciousness. Above them, the three suns of GX-249 painted the sky in colors that Lyra's people would have found chaotic and excessive. But she had learned to see the beauty in chaos, the wisdom in emotion, and the advancement in accepting that there was always more to learn. She activated her recorder one final time, final log entry as chief scientist of the Etherian Science Council. Beginning new log series as liaison Lyra of the Human Etherian Cooperative Mission. Today, we start learning how to be truly advanced, together.